I picked up this Gameboy Advance for only $1 in a thrift shop a couple years back, and it's been sitting in my drawer ever since. I recently found interest in at least getting this thing to work again, and if I'm successful, give it a bit of a needed upgrade. The whole thing is covered in dirt and scratches. The buttons feel really gummy and unresponsive, and it's missing its battery cover. But the worst issue is how the power switch doesn't work at all. I did find a workaround where if you pull on the switch slowly, you'll find a sweet spot where you can turn it on. But that's no fun, is it? So let's get started with this refurbishing job. The first thing we do is open up the shell of the console. There are 6 tri-ring screws that line the back of the housing. These screws do need a special bit to drive, but I did manage to get my hands on one. There's also one more Phillips head screw in the battery compartment. With all those out, the back housing lifts off easily. The actual PCB of the console is in surprisingly good shape. However, there is some really nasty dirt caked in all of the crevices. I'll be taking care of those later. The first issue at hand I want to tackle is the power switch. General advice on the internet states that you can get some isopropyl alcohol in there and rock the switch back and forth to get out any dirt. Ideally, I would want to remove that metal tab that holds the switch together, but I don't have a soldering iron on me to remove it. So squeezing some solution in there with a Q-tip should hopefully suffice. I am only using 70% isopropyl alcohol, which contains stuff like fragrances and moisturizers, so I did take care to use it sparingly. With all that done, I closed the housing again and did another test power on and it works! I can move the switch all the way now. Pretty neat. So with that major issue out of the way, the next thing I did was disassemble the thing completely. I'll be washing all the plastic parts to thoroughly take care of all that caked in dirt. For the delicate parts of the screen and the PCB, I'll just be cleaning with alcohol. There are 2 screws on each side that hold the PCB to the front housing. The ribbon cable for the display also needs to be removed. Fun fact, this is actually my first time dealing with a ribbon cable this small, so I was rightly nervous about it. The little gray tabs to unhook the cable are way too small for me to easily move through tweezers, so I had to bite the bullet and use my fingernail. With the screws and ribbon cable detached, the PCB lifts off nicely. And, oh my god, look at that speaker! Even the button membrane is covered in all sorts of gunk. Nasty. I'm gonna take care of that later. I also did take the time to remove the silicone pieces of the L and R buttons, so I can give the internals a good clean. With all the membranes and plastic buttons off the front housing, the next step was to get the screen out. This part was pretty nerve-wracking as you do need a bit of force to pry it out of the strong adhesive that holds it to the shell. I got my tiny spatula and worked my way under until I could hear the adhesive popping off, making sure not to tear it. Next thing to remove was the screen cover. I was initially at a loss on how to remove it since the adhesive for it was pretty strong, but eventually I found that you also have to be brave and just pop it off from the inside. Last bit was getting this metal piece of the back housing off. Finally got the whole thing disassembled. I do really appreciate how simple the assembly of the Game Boy Advance is. There really isn't that many pieces and all the electronics are just on one PCB. The plastic pieces I washed with just soap and water, and gave each piece a nice scrub with a toothbrush. I did have to pretty much mutilate these stickers to get them off. I do feel a little bad about it, since it is a piece of history from the kid who used to own this. If they ever see this, I really am sorry. After giving everything a good soap scrub, I made sure to rinse it all thoroughly. The sticker residue did persist, but luckily it had some Goo Gone to take care of that. All the pieces are washed and just left out here to dry. I then moved on to the screen cover. I just used a bit of alcohol and a scrub with a microfiber cloth for this. I made sure not to touch the adhesive part since I do want this thing to stick on again later. Next was the screen itself. Same process, avoiding the adhesive, just a bit more delicately since I don't want to cause any dead pixels. Next, I gave some of the tinier plastic bits and metal part a good rub with alcohol. Moving on to the PCB, I first gave the speaker a good rub with alcohol cause, my lord, that thing does not look good. Next were the L&R buttons, and the link cable port. I also did a pass in the cartridge port. I also did one last pass over the volume knob and power switch for good measure. The rest of the PCB actually looked in pretty good condition. I didn't want to ruin it with the cheap alcohol I have, so I more or less left it the way it is. Before I get everything back together, I did make sure to put the silicone bits back on the L&R buttons. It did take a bit of finesse, but it does get in there eventually. With everything all cleaned, all that's left is to put it back together. The thing is still all scratched up, it does feel a lot nicer in the hands than before. The gummy feeling buttons now feel a lot more light and snappy. Moment of truth. Now that's not good. I just realized something. I forgot to plug the display again. Oh my god. Volume up. There we are. That was scary earlier, but good thing it was just the cable that wasn't plugged in. I can nudge the power switch and no problems. Let's play Mario Brothers. These buttons are so much less mushy than they were before. Earlier, this thing was just felt so mushy and the A button was not responding at all. And that's it for now. It is pretty much in near perfect working condition now, save for the scratches and missing battery cover. If you have an old Gameboy lying around still, I really recommend giving it a good refurbish as well. It's incredibly easy to do, and the only weird part you need is the tri-wing screwdriver. It's totally worth it. As for me, I'm for sure not finished with this yet. I'm currently waiting on it, and I'll be giving this thing a good upgrade very soon.